And so the way that we'll do this is we have a couple of individuals who are mic'd. We also have wireless mics. I will ask some direct questions, but I'll also synthesize some of the questions in those buckets. And we'll see how much time we have remaining to see if we can just go through some additional questions. So I feel like we just had a budget conversation, so I'm actually going to hold off on that. And the first one that I'm going to focus on is parent engagement. Under parent engagement, there were a lot of questions related to opportunities for parents to get involved at the school level. But one of the resonating themes was, what are we doing to set expectations for principals that they must engage with their parents and parent community? So I'll start with you, Curtis, and I will ask that question of you, and then follow up with Alan Smith, our Chief of Schools, about parent engagement at the school level, but also how we're setting expectations with principals about the responsibilities they have to meaningfully engage with parents.
Thank you, Yana. Good afternoon. I think we're in the afternoon session now. There's a number of ways, and some of you that were just in our school site council session learned around how parents and families can and are getting involved in our schools, starting with just being a parent, dropping your child off, coming in and being in the hallways, helping out in the office. So there's a whole range of parent volunteer opportunities, and we actually coordinate that. You go on the website, you can register to be a volunteer. Each school actually posts the kinds of parent volunteer positions and things they love help with. You can get matched up with one of those opportunities. We have another level called our Parent Ambassador, where we're actually training parents across our school system to become parent leaders and to actually train other parents around things like college and career readiness and all the new standards and the testing, and really as parents reach out to other parents. Then there's the school site councils. We're actually having our big launch summit on Saturday, October 25th. So we're really encouraged and have done extensive outreach this year to get more parents aware of and interested in being a part of their school governance teams. And there's multiple other ways that individual school sites in our department is supporting to get parents engaged. Specifically on the piece around how do we make sure that in our school district that it's everybody's business, that we value our parents as the first educator of their child and as a very important voice in the direction that their school is going, and also supporting their individual child to do their best at school. And we're doing that in multiple ways. One significant thing we're doing this year is that we're actually embedding more training with our site leaders in their monthly meetings around family engagement. I think Alan will speak more to that. But that's just one example. We actually are really trying to integrate more of our family engagement work at other levels, along with teachers and with principals, to make sure that folks are aware of what our family engagement standards are, what the opportunities are to engage parents, and including our SSE part.
Actually, I have a follow-up question. So I have a question here that says, when will the district revise the family engagement standards to reflect LCFF requirements for family and community engagement?
Currently, we don't have a plan to actually, our standards that were passed by the board are actually based on research and best practices of what it takes for schools to do family engagement really well. So they're not as specific enough to name things that show up in the LCAP. In the new board policy and our new regulations around school governance, there is very specific language in there about including parent and student voice and having our school site councils be more representative of the populations that are named in the LCAP, both the state populations, foster youth, English language learners, and economically disadvantaged students, and other students that we've named as a priority in OUSD, specifically students that are receiving special education services and African American males that are needing additional academic support. So all of those groups are specifically named in our LCAP, and we've incorporated that into the new school site council resources and protocols about how we're trying to have our site councils be more representative.
Okay, and wanted to jump in and then talk about the schools part of it. So in Oakland, we have divided the structure. We have changed the structure of principal supervisors and how we are working with our schools. And the reason why is we want to make sure that schools get the support that they need and that there are more folks helping and holding schools accountable for the things that they say they are going to do. It is very important that I talk to you about accountability because in my mind it is not a punitive word, it is about support. And so we had to set out goals, and those 3 goals that we have in the post-secondary readiness are around observation and feedback. How do we get our principal leaders to go into schools and truly provide teachers with meaningful feedback that will help them improve their instructional practice? The second is around social-emotional learning. We want to make sure that all of our students not only are getting a rigorous instruction, a rigorous education, but also are receiving the other social-emotional pieces that make up the whole school. And then the third one is truly around college and career readiness. What does that look like in the 3rd grade? What does that look like in 5th grade when students are transitioning into 6th grade? What does it look like in 8th grade? And then what does it look like in high school when they're on the last leg of their K-12 journey with us? The other piece that we're doing is we've really worked with principal leaders to establish an extended site visit protocol. This site visit protocol is indeed around how we go in and talk to teachers, we talk to students, we visit every classroom, and we provide themes to this principal and their team to help them get to the right thing so that they can work on something that's going to have the biggest impact. And we will be starting those in about a week and a half. We will be visiting all of your schools. I will be a part of those teams, and we are looking forward to partnering with the schools. What we are really trying to do is break down the barriers that existed between those are the district folks and we are the school site folks. We actually are all educators. We actually, all of my team were principal leaders. I was a principal of all 3 levels. And it is important to me that we focus on what is important for students. And that means in many different ways. The personalized learning that is needed for students to be successful. Which along with that, and Nara will talk about the linked learning that goes with the personalized learning. How we accelerate students and provide them different options and not limited based on adult decisions. For example, if a student is proficient enough to take algebra in 8th grade, why don't we give that student an opportunity to take algebra, get that credit in high school so they can be accelerated once they get into high school. Let's not limit them. Then we also want to engage students. And so not just looking at the traditional way the school has been done in the past, but where are those opportunities to really expose them to what the real world it has for them? Internship opportunities, projects that are meaningful to them. If we look at where we are sitting 39 miles from Silicon Valley, we can see a very different landscape if we go right down the road to San Jose and what the Googleplex looks like. And then we come back to our schools and it looks nothing like that. So if we're truly going to prepare kids for that, how then do we get them in that space right now? The other pieces that are really important that we want to do is make sure that we are putting out a set of guidelines and policies that are going to be consistent across schools. And I don't mean tight, that every school has to do it in one way, but we want to make sure that every school has the same foundation. For example, the PBIS foundation is what we want all of our schools to have. And what does that mean? It means that in every classroom, we should see certain things. We should see that students have data. We should see that the teacher knows students' names. We should see some kind of grade, or excuse me, some kind of behavior chart. We should see those foundational things in every classroom. But if you're doing no-nonsense nurturing, it doesn't mean that you stop that. But the foundation has to be there. We also want the instructional foundation to be there. Meaning, when you walk into every classroom, can students access information? Do they know where to look for the word wall, on the word wall, and are the words pertaining to the unit? Do they get an opportunity to work with other students and learn from other students? Is there data up on the walls that shows how the students are doing? These are important. And then most importantly, do they have the materials needed to make sure that they're doing every subject in a rich way? These are the things that the Office of Post-Secondary Schools is working on. We invite folks to come in and see what we're doing, because we want to be transparent in this work. And we want to partner. I know that there are a lot of teachers here, but we want to partner with you to make it better. So I welcome any questions and suggestions that you have, and feedback that you have for the office.
All right, so sticking with that theme, Chief Smith, I'm going to turn to our questions related to school quality. Summarizing the questions that sort of fell in this bucket, and as you'll see, it's a pretty big stack of questions. For questions related to accountability for principals, the equitable distribution of school resources, school safety issues, schools that are inappropriately staffed, support for teacher development, grade advancement / social advancement of students. And so how would you summarize, as a school district, what are our priorities to ensure equitable schools from a resource, staff allocation, books, materials, accountability, professional development?
So in terms of school quality, what I would say is, let's back up. The first thing, in terms of this question, it used the words priority. What priorities will you use to emphasize school quality? It was one of the things that I started with in the conversation, and that is that we have a strategic plan. And a strategic plan, if you took a conservative view, a conservative count, there are 42 priorities listed, all big things. And the challenge is that there's no organization that's going to effectively do 42 big things. There were a number of things that I've heard mentioned in here, and in the questions actually that I've read all of them. I've heard questions around access to transportation. I've heard questions around the LL program. I've heard questions around college and career readiness, personalized learning, world language, resources, staff training, all of these different things. And you saw there is basically $500 some million, a finite budget. So all of that means that you must first identify your top few things. And that's where it starts, is identifying a top set of priorities that you say that the lion's share of the time and funding is going to go towards doing those things well. And you are here informing some of those by the questions that you ask. It gives us insight into what matters to you. The post-its that you were putting up, and that information gets collated. That information is being formed by conversations that I'm having all around the city with students and various stakeholder groups and leaders and just different levels. I know I'm meeting with teachers over the next several weeks as well at several schools across the district. That informs what ends up being the final 5 set of priorities. Once we have that, then we will engage in a series of engagements, not just for the rest of this year. The idea is that that engagement has to continue as a part of our regular practice to get information on the ground, us facilitating conversations and forcing the community to not just ask questions, but to make recommendations as to, okay, you say that, for instance, community schools is extremely important. That's what you want to be. to be real clear in terms of establishing some of those standards, those frameworks that you talked about. What is going to be true of all of our community schools? So perhaps we say that they'll all have a family resource center. Perhaps we'll say that they will all need to ensure that they have someone there whose job is to meet and greet and support the needs of families. I mean, those are the types of decisions that we need to make collectively. Now, obviously, I've just told you a bias of mine. I think that schools need to have those centers in place. I believe that there need to be individuals there who can meet and greet families and talk to families in the languages of the families that are represented in the school. But that's what prioritization does. What it also does is it recognizes there are a lot of things that we can do, but there are only a few things that are going to really drive and ensure equity across the entire system. Other pieces of quality, having a clear, consistent way of measuring what is considered a quality school as a district. So at the last board meeting, we presented some information, actually it was 2 board meetings ago, we presented some information around an update where we're at in terms of our quality school development process. And one of the things we talked about is having a very clear framework that's informed by not only student data in terms of academics, which is important, that needs to be there, but also information around how well students transition within that school, parent and choice and re-enrollment, how well does that school do in terms of getting families to choose it or to return back, surveys from families, from teachers, from students in those schools, how do they feel about the quality, and making sure that information is public. And then making sure that the measure is consistent across all types of schools, whether it's a district-run school or charter authorized district school, making sure that we have a consistent measure of what we consider quality. Then, after you have that measure, we then established a set of community-wide frameworks that says, if you are not performing at a particular level, this is what we do. These are the supports that you receive that helps get you to perform at higher levels. And essentially what you do is you define autonomy. You say that so long as you're just demonstrating great capacity to ensure that students are getting great education, that your staff is getting the type of professional learning opportunities that they should have, that their parents are being engaged the way they should be, and your students are learning, then you should continue to make the majority of the choices that are happening in your school. Where we see that capacity and student achievement is not there, then in those areas that are suffering, that's when more support would be provided, and also more direction being provided, that the data is quite clear, your parents are quite clear that they do not feel engaged. Parents are quite clear that they don't like the academic program. So we need to spend some time addressing this issue. And that's how that works. In addition to that, that all needs to be public. So people understand how that process works. How do I address that in a proactive manner if I want to maintain full autonomy? And then the other piece that's really important in terms of the quality school piece is making sure that we're really clear on how we reward and recognize quality, and how we duplicate quality. So there are successful school models that are here, or successful programs that are here. And we need to make sure that we're studying and engaged in research around those programs and thinking about where they could be properly applied and duplicated in other parts of the city, so that we're not always guessing at what needs to be done. There are proven things that have been proven to work here in the city, in the state, in this country, in different circumstances. And rather than guessing, we need to go, we need to study, we need to understand, and then we need to duplicate. And that needs to be supported as a part of that transparent process that allows for outside individuals who have ideas around how to improve the school to put forth those ideas, but also there needs to be a process that allows for that type of development to happen from internal, on the ground. Teachers in the school submitting a plan and a proposal that says, this is what we'd like to do. We have done that studying. We have done that preparing. We recognize what the issues are, and here's our plan for improving the school. Leaders on the ground, saying this is what we want to do and this is how we can support. And then our resource system, our financial resource system, must take into consideration that we know every year roughly how many schools will be in that tier, and right now we're calling them tier 3 schools of needing support, and budget some resources so that when they come up with those plans, they actually have some support to actually implement them. So all of that has to be there, and you know, in terms of being more granular and saying what are the specific strategies, that's why we have to have school psych council policies. We have that. The board has passed those. We've passed regulations on that, because I firmly believe that given access to the information, given access to the data, understanding the full extent of the resources and seeing examples of excellence, that those individuals closest to students, if they understand the bar, that they are the best positioned individuals to help make those choices. And I think that most effective schools, that's how you see them operate. And so it's very difficult for me to say all schools will do one thing.
So thank you for that. I want to turn our line of questioning just a little bit deeper, still sticking with the theme of quality schools. And that's this question around equity. And the way that the equity questions have come up today is not only from the leadership in the school district and diversity and equity, but also teachers and cultural responsiveness, cultural competency, disproportionality of our English language learners and our African American students, this tension that exists between the Black and brown community in some of our schools. So what I would like to do is actually go down the line. We've got 2 of our budget people, we've got 2 folks from our post-secondary readiness, family engagement, as well as at the staff central office level. And I'd like everyone to actually address how you are working to actively address equity through the individual departments that you support and lead.
So actually I'm going to call an audible and start, because we have 2 individuals who are not here. And so our Chief Talent Officer, Brigitte Marshall, and then also our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Devin Dillon. And it starts there in terms of with our talent. And so what we are doing is we're looking at, as we identify strategies, I can tell you, and I'm hoping really hard, and you know, actually leaning really hard and probably telegraphing, that one has to do with people. That and how we train, how we recruit, how we onboard, how we develop and support and recognize talented people. That's where the equity work starts. Who comes into our district, what do we do, and what type of training do we provide them, and how do that training, how does that support make clear expectations, share clear expectations around what our beliefs are around our students. So I want to make sure I share that. And then the second thing there relates to our academic program, making sure that equity, when we're selecting materials, how are our students, our different population, most diverse population in the country, how are they represented in those materials? How are they represented in how we teach and the strategy that we are teaching? And as Alan was talking about, Chief of Schools, Alan Smith was mentioning, how do we rethink the way we even structure our programs in our classrooms and how students experience the classrooms? And so I know Dr. Dillon would talk about those things, that in any strategy you pick, you got to make sure that you're always thinking about our most needy students, whether that's students who are on IEP, whether that's students who are representing a particular background or neighborhood or language. You always have to think about how it's going to impact those students. And with that, you can pass it, and other individuals can certainly jump in. Want to start down here with Ruth and make our way down, or we're going to start here?
There was someone on the end. Ruth, there's a microphone there.
Cool.
And so I'm Lamar McKeon, the Deputy Chief for Post-Secondary Readiness. And so when you talk about, I'm going to talk about equity, and I'm going to talk about equity and equality. So when we talk about linked learning and making sure that all our students are prepared for success in college, career, and community, we're going to start with all. And that means that the fundamental belief that all students have the capacity to succeed and making sure that we have a high standard and bar in all our classrooms and all our pathways for students. And one of the ways equity comes into that is making sure that every student, wherever they are, has the supports to get them to the place where they can be successful.
And one of the specific things in terms of post-secondary is that's why linked learning is so important. That's why those pathways are so important, because it's shown that across all groups, we're seeing higher graduation rates, lower dropout rates, more students performing at the highest levels in terms of their academics. And so that's true for ELL populations in those programs, that's true for special education students in those programs, it's true for African American males, females, and Latino males and females. So all those groups that we're trying to get at, we're seeing in those programs, they're performing at much higher rates, and we need to make sure that we are embedding that up and down the system.
So can everybody hear me? Yeah. So from the financial standpoint, those of you that were here before, you heard in this room, you heard Vernon talk about how this LCFF formula is structured to ensure that funds go to the students that are most in need. So that's kind of our first sort of approach to it, is that LCFF, local control funding formula, that's the money that the state provides to schools. It's divided between a base that would be distributed to all students, and then we get additional funding for students that are English language learners, low income, and foster youth. So the funds that those students are generating will go to those students, and then in addition to that, we get what we call concentration funds, because we have such a high proportion of that supplemental group of students. So those dollars, the supplemental and concentration, though it's just a portion of what we get, those are going directly to the schools and to the students that are generating those funds. In addition, because of the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Plan, there has to be a very tight integration between the community description of where the funds should be spent and the budget. So this is an opportunity, and it's a great mechanism for the budget side and the community and the academic side to be together and to make sure that the planning is integrated and that the funds are going where the community feels it's necessary, where academics feel it makes the most impact, and then, you know, influenced by we're kind of helping them figure out what's available.
Hi, it's Barry. I work with Susan on strategy, partnerships, and fundraising. I think one of the things that I've noticed over the years, the equity issue in Oakland schools has become really complex. You know, there was a time when it was very much hills and flats, black and white. And I think what we know today is that it's so much more complicated than that. And we've had a lot of different kinds of reforms and strategies over the years, whether it's small schools, results-based budgeting, the options process. And what we've seen is we've really seen the ability to move some schools to higher places, but we still have places that don't participate and haven't gotten the benefit of those kind of reforms. And so for every small school success, we still have schools like Frick and Brookfield and Mac and places that haven't been able to participate in those kind of distribution of resources that we would want. And so one thing that I do in my work is to make sure that we're always tracking how complicated equity is today, and that we really do get real equity, whether it's around the resources, the programming, the talent, and how it is that all schools, and a reform for all means all. And so that's what I keep my eye on, whether we look for fundraising, when we make decisions around strategy, and when we think about our partnerships.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, I just want to clarify, because there's a point that was made there. I just want to make sure I provide some clarity. Some of the schools, folks, the smallest schools, they actually get more than their proportional share of funding. So I want to be clear on that. And so there's this conversation around resources. They're actually resourced more And that's important to note. And the reason why they're resourced more, there is a point of diminishing returns. There's economy of scale. And if you get too small, then you won't have generate enough money to buy enough teachers, have enough counselors, offer a diverse set of academic programs to ensure that you have other resources. And so it's important that we have clear metrics on what small schools are, and there are clear metrics. There are national metrics. It's 125 students around. Being in a position where you can ensure that students have access to people who know their name, know their likes and dislikes, at least 4 or 5 people in the school who know those things, and they have access to rigorous academic programs. What we have done is we picked numbers. And the numbers have not been tied to fiscal, responsible budget development. And I want to make sure I call that out, because you can't do that. You have to identify what is a right size based on what you can fund within your budget to ensure that every kid gets access to your full academic program. That's extremely important, because you want to leverage all of your per pupil dollars to meet the needs of your students. There are times where you need to supplement schools' budgets, and it was mentioned by Vernon Howell and Ruth. They both mentioned it. There are times where there are additional funds that come to for certain groups of students, foster youth, free and reduced lunch students, English language learners. There are decisions that we make within our budget around students who have schools in certain neighborhoods that we know are highly impacted that needs additional resources. So we gave them additional resources for that. There may be other opportunities for this next funding round. Students who are in our alternative or continuation schools, that we may say we need to give those students additional weights. But those all have to be done intentionally on the front end. And so when you see schools struggling and they are small, it's normally because they're not intentionally small. And then 2, when they were intentionally small, the contemplation around what are the resources that need to go into that school to ensure that that school is successful hadn't been fully baked out. And I want to make sure I share that, because that is something that's not, that's not me, and I've had several practices in terms of doing that with schools and making sure that that is done, but also around the country that is being done. And we have examples here in Oakland of some of those schools that are small and appropriately resourced, and that's how you ensure equity happens in those schools. So there are things that you can do unintentionally that creates unequitable situations. It happens on the other end of the spectrum too, in terms of higher performing schools and lack of access to certain resources because they don't have enough of a particular group of kids. So the group of kids that they do have in their school may not get the extra support that they need because they're not a large enough group of those students, but those students are still there. So it's important, it's a nuance, and it's important that as we go through these engagements that we delve into that nuance as much as possible so that solutions are recommended up the line as to how we ensure that anything that we do is intentionally done and not done unintentionally.
I just want to chime in on this issue on equity. In some ways, the issue on equity is quite simple in our city. We actually have children that are born in neighborhoods a mere 2 miles apart from each other that have a 15-year difference in life expectancy based on the zip code in which you happen to be born. And so, when we embarked on the journey 5 years ago around developing community schools, thriving students, with many people in this room, our entire strategic plan is built on that body of data, all those social determinants of health that said when kids are situated differently, we need to provide different levels of support to actually level the playing field. So equity is not equality, because if where you are born happens to have predict life outcomes, then we need to do something different as a public education system to make sure that we're raising the floor for everybody and that we don't lower expectations for anybody because of that. So I just want to be clear, when you look at the LCAP, when you look at our strategic plan, the notion of being a full-service community school, the superintendent actually articulated that quite beautifully earlier. It's actually to ensure that no matter where you are situated in any one of our schools, that we're designed in a way that we can meet the needs of your child to make sure that when they are walking across the stage, that they have every opportunity that they need to make a choice about what's going to happen next in their life in college and career. And so that's really, for me, the underpinning of everything we're doing. Our work around all of the disproportionate discipline in our district, we've made huge reductions in suspensions of African American students as a result of policy changes, working around restorative justice work, doing the work around positive behavior intervention supports, our family engagement work. Really, the work that I lead, I consider that creating the conditions for learning. I actually need to really partner with the gentleman on my right to say that if we want teachers to be able to teach, principals to lead, that we have to create the conditions so that all of our kids are thriving in those classrooms. And that requires us to be in partnership and not live in these old binaries of black and brown and, you know, we're fighting over the crumbs. It's really about, particularly when I think about our school governance and our family engagement, we're kind of at ground zero of really demonstrating how do all of us from all different backgrounds come together and do what's right for our kids. And so the structures that we have at our schools to try to support making that happen requires all of us to do that. So whether we're doing restorative justice, we actually have a parent component of that, we have a youth-led part of that, and we have an adult part of that. We want everybody to be engaged in the things that we're doing that actually help lift up all of our kids, no matter where they're situated, to get what they need. So we've all been a part of that work. I hope we continue to have this dialogue about how we address the areas where we still have gross disparities around who's actually succeeding and who's not, and who's furthest from opportunity. So again, I'm just saying that's actually the work we're doing. It's embedded in every policy that we've passed over the last several years, and it's embedded in where we're heading around really trying to think about the priorities that we have and the essential questions that our chief of schools, Alan Smith, at their schools asking right now is that exact question. What are we doing in our schools to be sure that the kids that are furthest from opportunity are actually being brought into the fold? That's the question that our principals are asking themselves every single month. So I just want to really emphasize that that's actually at the heart of what we're doing.
So Curtis, one of the things that you mentioned was this idea of you see your role as creating the environment where learning can take place. So I'd like to use that as a transition to talk about school safety. I have 3 questions here, and I'll just read them all and would love you all to chime in. The first says, Dear Superintendent, what are your thoughts around policing schools on campuses and school police? Are you willing to explore removing the school police? Why or why not? Second question, given how rampant child trafficking and exploitation is in the Bay Area in general and in Oakland, particularly, what is OUSD's strategy to prevent our children from falling prey to those exploiters who would victimize them?
Yeah, actually, what I would say is, in terms of starting the conversation, I'll start, and then we'll have Alan jump in terms of the school piece, because those 2 questions present very interesting questions and balances. I will say this, that this is the 5th district that I've been in, and every one of them have had police in the schools. And the district that I just left, in the effort that I led, we had been recognized across the country, had people traveling in all over the place from the country flying me in to help their districts do what we were doing to reduce disproportionality and end the over suspension of African American males and so on and so forth. And we did that with police in our schools. So I don't believe the issue is about police. The issue from my perspective is, if you're going to have them, who are they? And what are they doing in schools? And are they aligned with the types of perspective that Curtis Rickey just talked about, in terms of, do they have a strong sense of social justice? Do they want to promote restorative approaches to solving solutions? Are they there to find ways to help students enter the criminal justice system? Or are they there to help students understand the the opportunities that they have and the full potential they have to be successful in the classroom and to stay removed from that system. Are they there to give students one shot and then you're done, or are they there to help students understand that, like them, many of those individuals who are wearing those uniforms, young people make mistakes and they deserve second, third, and fourth, and fifth opportunities, because that's the whole reason why they're young. As I often say, there's a reason why, thank you for joining me, there's a reason why young people stay at home as long as they do. It's because they need to. And so we want to create that type of environment in our district, and I would say that if I had the choice, I'd rather be in a position where I am in control of the individuals who can go into school and have an opportunity to train them, given the alternative. And I don't want to say anything negative about our city's police, because I don't know enough to say that, but just to know that there's also been equal concerns expressed around some of the practices there. I want to be in a position where I can control it and partner with the community about the type of training that we should be providing our police, our school leaders, our school security officers, our teachers, our supervisors over all of those individuals, and how they partner with the community to make sure that our schools are both safe and welcoming and supportive and uphold equity. So I would say that, and then allow Alan to jump in. And I'm not sure if you want to answer the question as well.
Sure. I think that that Mia will talk about some things that we did at this very high school at the beginning of the year with our school staff, everyone from principals to teacher leaders. I also want to say that it is, extremely important that we keep all of our kids safe in every school and in every neighborhood that our schools are in. And by going around to different schools, we're having the opportunity to look at the very simplest of things. How do people enter and exit the schools? How is there access for anybody to walk off the street and get into the office or get on the playground? And then we got to invest the money to make sure that when folks come in to check into the schools, to pick up students or to drop off or to do business, that there's a way to capture that. And those may seem like simple things, but we want our children to be safe, and we can't take any of that for granted. In addition to safety, I also think it's important to state that we want our schools, whether they're on the west side, the east side, the hills, or wherever, to look like the very best learning community in the world. And that truly means that when you walk into a school, it should not matter what side of town it is on, you're going to see the same exact thing consistently across this district. And that is clean floors. That is bulletin boards that have work and are not ripped. That is paint on the walls that is not chipped. That means no trash or very little trash in the areas outside. And if we see it out there, we're going to pick it up. Our students deserve the best. Not only should they be kept safe, but they should be given the best opportunities. When they walk into a place that looks good, they also feel safe. So that is a big part of it for us. And every day we are striving to answer that question and modeling it. And so when the superintendent, myself, and all this team are on school grounds, not only are we talking to the principals and the teachers and looking at instruction, but we're picking up trash. And we want folks to see us doing it, because that's what we expect for every school, for every student.
I just want to add, we also take the time to talk to the office staff, the custodial staff, the cafeteria staff, and the security to find out from their perspective what are the things that they need, what are the things that should be better in the school, and so on and so forth. So that's a regular part of the visit protocol. We get to several schools every week. By the end of the year, I would have been into every school, some of them multiple times, because of both school visits, but also talking with students, and then also faculty meetings, talking directly with the staff. And that's not just this year, that's part of our getting connected work this year. And then next year, if we continue, it's about staying connected. And so we want to continue to do that, and we're using that information constantly. We meet every Friday, and we talk about how we are taking that information and using it to inform the training and all that. And I think Mia Settles-Tidwell is going to jump in here.
Sorry for being late to join the group. So right here at this campus, we had Safety Day, and I'm not sure if it was already mentioned, but we realized from the multiple LCAP engagements that we had last year, as well as when we were building the strategic plan some 5 years ago, safety came up as a #1 issue for parents, for community, for teachers, for principals. So it was unanimous that we needed to pay attention to safety. So our superintendent was very clear with me that we needed to not only invite principals, because our former way of doing things was just to invite principals to a training. But this time we invited all of our cafeteria staff, our security officers, our OUSD police. We invited our custodians, basically our front office staff, and we had a training that was really focused on the job that we need to do to keep our students safe physically. So there was social emotional training with our grief training staff and behavioral training staff. So we took it from the social emotional, the physical, and then we talked about our responsibility to continue training our security officers. So one of the pieces of data that we received back was that our security officers had a trend of not being as kind and not being as professional as we'd like them to be. And so setting up trainings to ensure that they will be welcoming and they'll know how to talk with parents when they come is definitely a #1 on our agenda this year. We also need to have a relationship with our city. That's very important because our schools are actually the safest place for our children to be. The biggest part is our outside environment that we need to work and collaborate with. So we're planning to continue our connection with the city police so that our structures are aligned and that we're communicating clearly with our OUSD police and the city police about our safety procedures. We also have emergency safety, because sometimes we only think about the day-to-day safety, but we also need to strengthen our ability to respond, be first responders, and first responders cannot always be the principal. It needs to be the whole school community understanding their role and responsibility in keeping the whole school safe. We know about physical safety. Our buildings need to be safe as well. Safe from having easy access to buildings, and I think that's what Chief Allen was talking about, is our procedures on the campus. Finally, I think about safety, that we get safety data from our ombudspersons. Some people file complaints about bullying at the school, and we actually analyze that data, and that helps to tell us what's going on at our school in terms of cultural safety. So, and then finally there's security. So security and safety are two different things to us. Safety are the procedures that we put in place to make sure that we understand what's going on in our community, as well as the communication. But security is there to deter things from happening. So when we think about security cameras, which are great, but they can't stop someone from getting hurt. They can tell us who did it. They can show us what's going on in a certain area. So again, we need to continue to understand safety and get more information out there to you about how we can keep each individual school safe, as well as what work we're doing to align with the city. So we are definitely looking at that, and professional development is the key.
I want to make one other point, because sometimes when this conversation comes up, people will think that it's not being heard or being asked for by other individuals. But our security staff, they're asking for training. So I want to be clear on that. Our school OUSD police officers, they want the training. We're really close to finalizing search for our full-time chief to support in developing more of that training. Our clerical staff, our custodial staff, our cafeteria staff, they want the training. They want the safety training, and that's why it's important that we make tough decisions that prioritizes how people access their schools. They're individuals who are used to just walking in a building. And while that may sound great, I don't want my child going to that school. I want my child going to the school where they know every individual who's been in that school. So, you know, I have 7-year-old twins and I have a 12-year-old. And I want to know that that school knows who's there at all times, and those people are supposed to be there. And that is a shift. Many districts across the country have made that shift because safety is number one. We are going to make that shift because safety has to be number one. And then we train people, we got to give them what they're asking for because they're certainly asking for it. So I want to make sure that, you know, we're not twisting arms here. This is what people want, including our police, our security, everyone. They're asking for these things.
Okay, so with our remaining 5 minutes, I'm going to ask my wonderful, fabulous, intelligent, articulate peers to keep their responses succinct. Because we have 2 questions that fall within 2 more buckets that really bubbled up to the surface this morning with the questions that we received on the cards. And so the first question, and I also want to be respectful of people's time. The first question is around teacher effectiveness and teacher development. And I have a series of questions here, and I'm going to summarize them. We have a gamut of Teach for America or quote-unquote inexperienced teachers in classrooms. We have teachers who really want to teach well, but discipline is a problem and classroom management is a challenge. We have students with social, emotional, behavioral issues that are a challenge for classroom management. So specifically, I'd like to know, what are we doing as a district to support the professional leadership development of our teachers?
And just to share that Alan's both Alan coach.
Superintendent said so.
And I will gladly do that. This is around the right kind of professional development for teachers. It is also, you know, the differentiation and finding out where teachers are in their professional life cycle and making sure they get it. It is also about making sure that the school leaders are in there observing and providing feedback that will help teachers get better. We understand that there in this district, there are many many ways that teachers can come to this district. What we want to do is make sure that they're fully supported to do the work that we are asking them to do in this district. And to do that well, we have to make sure it's consistent. We have to make sure that we are talking and listening to them. We have to make sure that we're partners, and we have to make sure that the professional development that they get is meaningful. And then we're going into their classrooms and supporting them while they're doing work with strategies, small chunk strategies that will help them get better. So that's how I'll answer that question. I did want to say before I pass the microphone, Miss Brianna, is that you, young lady? I have your card. I thank you for asking that question, and I'm going to talk to you individually, okay? But I want your voice to be heard because that's a very courageous question to ask. All right? Thank you.
There's multiple levels of things we're doing to support teachers around the issue of classroom management and supporting students with their social and emotional needs. And I don't want to give you a laundry list of those things, but I'll just highlight a couple. One thing is that through the new social and emotional learning standards that our board adopted, we've literally been in front of hundreds of teachers during their summer institutes. We're partnering with our human resources to cover back to like who's actually here and how we bring people into our system. So we're working very closely with all the new teachers and all the new leaders coming into our schools just around creating that base. That at the heart of what we need to do in schools is build relationships with young people. And our social emotional learning standards from pre-K through adult, where we said that social emotional learning is not something that helps kids. It's something that we actually do together as a community. And so therefore there's accountability in those standards for all of us to be self-aware and to make good decisions and do all the things that will create the kind of conditions for learning we're talking about. The other thing I just want you to know, we are We are training, this summer we trained a number of teachers over 4 full days specifically around classroom management. We have teachers at 5 schools in this community in East Oakland that actually have people in their classrooms through the No Nonsense Nurturing program that are doing in vivo. People actually have an earpiece in their ear. They're actually learning in real time how to respond and how to create cultures that are respectful, that are engaging, and that are culturally relevant. We also are doing a lot of work around training our teachers around trauma-sensitive environments. This is not about pulling a kid aside for therapy. This is knowing that many of our children come with the experience of community violence, family violence, other things that they're carrying in their hearts that make it challenging for them to actually stay focused in school. We're working with our teachers to create classrooms that allow those students to take a deep breath and be present to their learning. And there's multiple other things that we're doing to support that. We have a long way to go. It's work we're committed to. We're really fortunate in the last couple of weeks that we just received 2 very large grants to specifically support our work with teachers around trauma-informed practices, around restorative practices, and around our positive behavior supports in classroom management. So we're constantly looking for ways to ramp that up and to partner so that when we're actually working with teachers, that we don't just talk about content, but we actually train them on the how. So you can have all the content knowledge, but if you can't engage the student or build the relationship or create the conditions for them to access all that you know, then we're back to where we started. So there's this partnership with the teacher quality work around the academic and the social emotional.
Okay, final question is related to equity in a lot of ways, but it's about specific programs at our schools. And so there are a number of questions here related to STEM programs, art programs, gardening opportunities, recycling programs, foreign language, access to music. And so I'd like to know, how do we begin to prioritize which of those programs do we support, do we need, and how do we get those programs into our schools?
So, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So what I would say is relates to my orientation towards all those programs. What I regularly talk about in terms of quality schools, particularly as students transition to middle and high school, is, but really it has to be up and down the system, but it becomes more important as kids get older, is you have to personalize education. So we need to focus on personalized education. So it gets back, I'm going to get back to the theme of saying there are 5 big things that we focus on. What types of things? It can be things around people, it can be things around, we're going to focus on community schools, it can be things like we're going to do linked learning. I mean, these are actual real things that I've been hearing roll back up to me during the community engagement. Those are the types of things. I have actually like 10 things on my board, 10 big buckets that I've been hearing. Once you identify those 5 things, then it's saying, what is it that we want to ensure that every child gets? And I'll just tell you my orientation. My orientation is to ensure that every child, well, you see the slides up there where it said every kid is in a healthy school, and they get taught by talented individuals who work collaboratively together, who teach from bell to bell, and ensure that every day in every class they get great instruction. I mean, those are the types of things that matter. And when you talk about programs, you have to, and you talk about activities and personalized learning. Young people get excited about very specific things. Art, music, PE, drama, theater, robotics, chess, constitutional scholars, debate, athletics. That's what they get excited about. All of those types of things. I go on and on and on and on. So STEM, STEAM, all of it. It's those things. And in order to do that, which I want to do all of that. So, you know, my daughter's in an arts conservatory. She dances. She loves to dance. She gets excited about dance, but her best subject's science. For me, you can have all the dance you want if you're going to get excited about science and math and social studies and English. And so she's doing all of that. And well, that's what I'm saying. She can do all of that she wants. If that's what gets her excited, to be there, to say that that's what makes school fun, and that allows me to be able to talk to her about the other things, then I want her to have that. And if I want that for mine, I certainly want it for yours. So then how do we get that? We decide that we can't have our cake and eat it too. What that simply means is that there are some big things around how we experience school, around how we spend our resources, about all the things we want the district to do, so that we say we're not going to require those things. We want to focus on these things so that we can give more money to schools so that they can bring back world language and speech and dance and music and all those other things. And then finally, I'll say this. I was just at a school, it was a middle school, and I was talking to the students about what they liked about school, and they talked about how they liked their teachers, and they liked the principal, and they liked that it was a school community and all that. But what the students really began to hone in on is they began to hone in on the electives that they had. They began to hone in on the fact that they had access to some technology that allowed them to do some projects that they were really excited about. And in order to provide that, all of those things we want to do, then we need to make sure that you study those budget slides, that you make recommendations up as to saying if there were a few big things, what we think those should be. And so we have that information, and then that we're willing to engage in really tough conversations around what we're willing to give up. I just, in terms of answering that question, said that those things should not be things we're willing to give up, and the only way we're not going to be able to give those things up is to be able to think differently about how we organize schools, how many schools we run, because we are disproportionate. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. It's been backed up by a number of sources that have said we run too many schools for the number of students we have, which means we sacrifice quality, we sacrifice the number of people we have, the number of programs we have. We fix that, we improve our programs, we make sure that we're going to have roughly the same number of people, because we have the right number of people for the number of kids. We don't have, we're resource spread too thin. Run a number of buildings. It costs me the same amount of money to run a building that is 90% or 80% empty as it does 100% empty, but I only get money for the kids in the school. So it means I'm wasting money. Money that could be going to libraries, money that should be going to them, money that should be going to more resources. And as much as I hear other conversations around what about this, what about that, that's the central issue. And when we have that conversation, and we will, and how to make sure that every one of our students do not have to give up essential things. This morning I talked about crayons. For our students, it's computers, it's other resources, it's books, it's libraries, it's teachers, it's art supplies. When they don't have to give up those things, then Oakland, because of its passion, because of the intelligence in the room, because of the diversity, because of the access to resources and the passionate people who care, will be the best urban school district in the country. And that's a fact. We just have to decide to do that.
That is certainly a superintendent that we should stand behind and support. So thank your superintendent for being here this afternoon. Some next steps, as you all are quietly gathering your things and preparing to leave for the afternoon. Our next community meeting will be on October 25th at West Oakland Middle School, so you can look for more information related to that. There are a number of questions that we were unable to get to this afternoon around charter schools, around the district's debt, around special education services and transportation. I am taking all of these cards. My peers and colleagues will respond to these cards. If you signed in this morning at the registration table, those responses will be emailed to you by next Friday. If you did not, those responses will be posted on our website. Have a terrific Saturday, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you later.